Along the line of Hadrian's Wall, we find repeated evidence for the existence of a deity, a warrior god. Oh, he also liked trees. His name was Cocidius, and he's often depicted carrying a shield and waving a spear. And he was extremely popular in the military zone along the length of Hadrian's Wall. But I wondered if he was actually exclusive to the Hadrian's Wall zone, or whether he was worshipped anywhere else. And that is what this week's video is about. We're going to search for Cocidius, but somewhere other than Hadrian's Wall. We are going to try and find ourselves a Cocidius a long way from the wall. Will we find him? And will you be convinced that it is him?
This film includes some great footage of the Leeds Cocidius, plus a very special bonus Robin.
Oh, and I'm sure, most importantly, you have remembered that it is my birthday. Well, who was Cocidius then? And why is he so associated with this? With Hadrian's Wall? Hang on, I'll just activate this. Clever this stuff, isn't it? So there he is. That's a very typical image of him from this area. You notice he's got his shield, he's got his spear, but other variations are available.
Like this intaglio found at South Shields, an altogether more woody, dare I say it, more Robin type appearance here.
Quite incredible to think that along this stretch of the wall here at Wall Town, looking out across the wilderness, there would have almost certainly been Roman soldiers stationed here who would have revered Cocidius. Celtic in origin, he was adopted by the Romans when they arrived here. They associated him with Mars, their god of war, and Silvanus, their god of the untamed woodlands. Now, the Romans were, of course, famously polytheistic, so none of it needed to make any sense, just as long as they had lots of gods. That is what they liked. Now, along the course of the wall, we have 9 depictions of Cocidius from east to west, and 25 inscriptions. Mars, the red god then, and this word is the Brythonic for red. Over at Ebchester, they found this, and that first word may refer to marsh, but it's more likely that it is referring to alder. Now, what is it that happens to alder, black alder, when it is cut? It bleeds blood red. Don't know why I did that voice. I always do that voice, don't I? I just don't know why. It's weird. Let me activate that. We'll put, that is a fairly rare ancient Irish god. Look familiar?
Eric Burley has Bewcastle as Phanocodai from the Ravenna cosmography, where it appears between Maya, not that disastrous AI co-presenter we tried for a bit, but the fort at Bowness, and the fort at the improbably pronounced Broome. It also was home to 9 altars, and 6 of those were dedicated to Cocidius, plus a couple of cheeky little silver plaques.
Now, I'm sure I have been too modest to mention that it is actually my birthday, but I am expected to be spoilt by you lot for entertaining and informing you week in, week out, week in, week out. I'm sure you've got something lovely lined up for me at the end of this week's video. Now, if you look at the distribution of the finds of these references to Cocidius, they are all along the line of Hadrian's Wall, with the exception of one down at Lancaster. That was until 2001, when a lady was out in some woods walking her dog, and she spotted a carving on a rock. Now, those woods are in Leeds. Over the years, there has been much excitement every time a new carving of Cocidius has turned up, but sod's law being what it is, many of them are on private land. Now, if you own some of that private land that has a Cocidius carving on it, specifically Carr Hill near Chester's Fort, and very, very specifically Yardhope, and you can provide me with access to that, that would be terrific, and I would let you count that as a birthday present.
Just had a very embarrassing moment. I've stopped to grab a coffee and someone was looking at me and I just assumed that they recognised me. So I said it was okay if they wanted my autograph or a sort of selfie picture. And then they said they hadn't got a clue who I was. So they were just interested to see somebody who wasn't clad head to foot in Gore-Tex here. Embarrassing. Before we head off down south to see if we can find Cocidius outside of his Hadrian's wall sort of heartlands, when I say down south, it's Leeds. That's where we think we may have a Cocidius in the woods in Leeds. I thought it would be a good idea to see if we could find a rock carving of him here in his heartlands. So you find me here today. I must be about 15 miles north of the wall on the eastern side. And there is a little bit of a divide with Cocidius between the west and the east. In the west, he tends to be more associated with Mars, so we may call him their Mars Cocidius. In the east, he tends to favour the Silvanus side of things, so perhaps here we should call him Cocidius Silvanus. Now, up here, somewhere in a disused quarry, I'm hoping we can find the remains of what was once a really incredible Roman-era rock carving of the fellow. But unfortunately, a local Tourt landowner got fed up with people visiting him in the 19th century and blew him up. But I believe there might be a little bit left that we can have a look to. Now, if you look at the Ordnance Survey map, he is actually marked on it, Robin of Risingham. And I believe that is the correct pronunciation in the local dialects, Risingham, although every fibre of my being wants to say Risingham. But there he is, Robin of Risingham. But finding him, I think, might be a little bit harder than that map implies. Once again, oh, incidentally, note this barrel here in case you decide to come and try and find Rob of Risingham, because he is not easy to find. But yeah, once again, this is a place I've wanted to come to for a very long time. I've left it way too long. Anyhow, my research leads me to believe that he is up here in the trees. As you climb up through the woods, there are the remnants of a path. People used to come here, but they don't appear to now. And then we get to this here, set in a little alcove at the top. Now, if you look around here, you can see that this used to be, it might still be marked on the map actually, this used to be quarried. But here we have him. Here is Cocidius, but we believe this is Cocidius Silvanus. Note here, not a shield that we would expect to see with the Mars version. We have got a hair there. And then this thing over here is an altar, apparently. But if you look at the sign up there, you'll see that this is not a Roman original. This was erected here in 1983. I will also point out that he doesn't have the typical Mars-type spear. He has got a bow, and you can see a quiver of arrows over on that side as well. So altogether, a far more sort of woody aspect. That is a real treat getting to see that, you know, although I must clarify, it does not count as a substitute for a birthday present. I am expecting plenty of presents. I think this 1983 reproduction is about 1/3 scale of the original that used to stand up here. I'll correct that on the screen if I've got that wrong. But there is some of the original left. Some of him survived the explosion. Now, if you follow me around here, can you see I'm going into a dip where people have been digging, and then down here we have the bottom bit of Cocidius Silvanus, or should I say Robin of Risingham. But look, there's his legs, there's his feet. I'm going to get out of this hole so I can just describe him a bit better to you. It is difficult, you know, sometimes to avoid the old YouTube hyperbole, but isn't he? He's terrific, isn't he? Now, they were crazy about Cocidius in this area. We're not too far away from a fort where a whole bunch of inscriptions, altars and the likes to him have been discovered over the years. But we're a little way from that fort here. So I love the idea that out here in the wilds, somebody came out, they carved this impressive thing into a rock face. If we look at the 18th century pre-explosion depictions of him, he had some sort of plaque above his head with, I don't know what the writing was in there, but there would have been something somewhere down the line. But people used to come out here to this quiet place, a little way away from the fort, to worship Cocidius Silvanus. Now, just to talk you through what I can see here,
We have got that altar that I pointed out on the reproduction, and the hair, I think, shows up terrifically, pretty better, in fact, than on the reproduction. And then you can see his legs and his feet really well, the sort of bottom of his tunic thing. You know, what an absolute travesty that the rest of him has gone probably less than 200 years ago. I think we could safely say that he was carved into a natural outcrop of rock out here. What I don't know is if this huge lump that he is still on today, the remains of him are on behind the reproduction, whether this huge lump is where he originally was or whether this was dislodged in that explosion. That I don't know. I did find a couple of videos on YouTube involving visits to see Robin, but none of them made it clear to me where his actual original legs were. So I've done this little bit to show you. This is where they are. So there's your reproduction. Behind it, on what would be the right-hand side if you stood looking at it, there is Robin's legs. Although clearly he wasn't anything to do with Robin Hood. That's the normal later sort of mumbo-jumbo kicking in. I think if we look up here above Robin, you can see there's a bit of rock fall. So I suspect we've had some over-enthusiastic antiquarians sort of coming in from that direction. They've caused the rocks to sort of fall onto the rear side of Robin. Well, that was terrific. I have checked my brain, and the original was 4 foot tall. So that recreation is a half-sized replica of what was originally there. Now, although I've long wanted to do this, as I mentioned, this does not count as a substitute, a replacement for actual birthday presents. I suppose buying someone a coffee for their birthday is okay, but super thanks are probably better. These clothes don't tailor themselves, you know. I would like to say thank you to our members and encourage anybody who would be interested in perks and additional content to go and check that out. I'm going to set a little competition for our members, and for those of you who follow us on Facebook, I will post a photo of me showing the relationship between the replica and the original legs, and then we'll see how many of you can come and find him and post your pictures back in return. Oh, I would like that new book by Guy de la Bedouin, the one about how pervy Samuel Pepys was, so perhaps one of you could get that. Now, don't panic. I am not making a film about rainforests again. I've learnt my lesson from that. Deep in these woods, on the outskirts of Leeds, of all places, there is a possible Cocidius. Yes, that's right, you did hear correctly. Leeds, of all places. It's a sort of a suburb of Leeds called Adel. Now, I once hilariously did a video in this area where I pronounced Adel as Adele, like that awful screeching popular singer. And you can imagine the price I paid for that in the comments, the tedious price. People are still correcting me to this day on that video about how to pronounce it. No one ever thinks to check the comments to see if anybody already has done that. If they did, they would currently find 728 corrections. To put this in perspective then, we are about 110 miles south of Corbridge, a long way out of that Cocidius militarised zone along the length of Hadrian's wall. Now, a rock carving was discovered in these woods, and it was scheduled in 2001, and it is believed to be a carving of Cocidius. Now, despite being surrounded by suburbia, these woods are quite complex. I have been sent a drop pin of his location by one of our viewers, James. Hello, James. Thank you for sending that. So hopefully that will lead me to him, and we can see what you will make of him. James, I am very grateful for that, but I just wanted to point out clearly drop pins are not, they don't qualify as birthday presents. Thanks to James, then I've got my drop pin. Let's make our way through these woods and see if we can find Cocidius. I always enjoy these antiquarian adventures that take me to suburbia or to the edges of suburbia. I mean, literally just over there is a Marks and Spencer's BP garage. And yet here in the dappled sunlight, we've got ancient wood banks. We've got a landscape that potentially hasn't changed very much at all. And I think for a very long time. And I think that's a key thing for us to consider when we find our rock carving. If we find our rock carving. Despite the idyllic surroundings, there are clues that we're near built-up areas. Look at this, some police murder tape hanging in a bush. And then just over here, next to it, we have an ancient gatepost. I may have got lucky, by the way, with my camera. I may have caught a squirrel on a tree. That doesn't normally happen. But in terms of nature, the car park certainly has lots of nature. It seems to be very popular with dog walkers, and every dog from here, miles around, seems to congregate there to do some yapping. You know, for a chap who's just about to enter his late 50s, I don't know if I mentioned it's my birthday, generally I do okay combining analog technology with digital, but relying on a drop pin on Google Maps is something that still makes me feel slightly uneasy. But it's telling me to go up here, and that makes sense because I can see rock outcrops starting to appear up there in the trees, and that's what we need for a rock carving, isn't it? Bang on track, thanks James. There he is, up on the southeast face of that crag with my notebook next to him to show you where. What a wonderful spot. What is that, a shrine? I don't really know, but I'll take you up there, see if you can see him as he comes into shot. All of a sudden, he appeared to me right back there. Let's see how you do. Keep genderising him. Don't know, I'm probably not meant to do that nowadays, but through the magic of filmmaking, there's my notebook, and I'm hoping you're going to be able to see his face appearing. That's got to be Cocidius, hasn't it? Isn't that absolutely marvellous? There's the top of his head. I think his feet are about there. Beautiful. Can we be sure that this is Cocidius then? Well, no, of course we can't. But stylistically, the carving is quite typical. It's Celtic, isn't it? And it's quite typical of Brigantes areas. And that's where we are. We are in the Brigantes area. And that round shield is quite common during the sort of early part of the Roman occupation when the Brigantes were coming under their control. I really hope the camera is doing this justice. I think he is incredible. As well as his round shield, in his other hand then, he is holding a long spear. You can see his eyes and his nose. I think that's really Celtic. And he's got those sort of Celtic long limbs as well. Isn't he marvellous? Now, sorry about this, Crusties, but his height is about 40 centimetres. I've taken that from the Historic England listing. I have to do the old Swiss Army knife. The fish scaler, that is about 7 centimetres. So that's, what's that, 3 of those, 4, 5, 6. So yeah, that's about right, isn't it? About 40 centimetres. One of the questions has to be, what is he doing here? There he is. Now, he's quite low down. His feet are quite low down to the ground level, aren't they? That, of course, may have risen in nearly 2,000 years. But what is this? Is this a little impromptu sort of shrine? It's a wonderful spot, and I can see why it was selected all those years ago. It's even today, with Greggs down the road, it's really peaceful. We can't be any more than a mile or so away from the large civilian settlement that was at the fort here at Adel. So I like to imagine that this, as today, was woodland, and that somebody who lived there, when they needed to get away from it all, they would come out into this. I mean, it's idyllic today, isn't it? What a beautiful, peaceful place. They'd come out here, easy to get to, and this spot is just magical. Now, is it difficult to imagine? Look at these stones that we've got here. Can we imagine a sort of simple timber roof fashioned on the top there, maybe propped up with some stones, and they could come here and say hello to Cocidius. I also think here we've got almost like a little set of steps approaching it. What do you reckon? My imagination might be really running away with me here, but I can almost see some steps running down here as well. What do you reckon then? Do you think that is Cocidius? Do you know of any other examples of this chappie not along the course of Hadrian's Wall and potentially much further south than this? Or perhaps you can get me access to those ones we know about that are buried deeply on private land. I'd definitely let that count as a birthday present, by the way, especially if it was Yard Hope. So why did the Romans do this? Why did they arrive in conquered lands and then sort of co-opt the local deities into their systems? Now, many people believe that that was a deeply strategic, political, cynical thing, a way of bringing the suppressed locals into line. And I think that is a factor that we have to consider. Now, I've come here today to Adel Church while I'm in the area to talk about this, but also I've come here because there is talk of some Roman stone artifacts in the area, including a Roman phallus, but I have had no luck. The church, I think, dates back to the Norman period. There are some old bits and pieces by the main gate, and that includes a Roman capital. But I've asked around, everyone is denying all knowledge of there being a Roman phallus here. I did pick up that it might be in the coach house. Spoke to the gardener, he let me in. No sign, no luck, no phallus. I am an atheist, despite the best Bible-bashing efforts of some of you lot. You know who you are. And since a very young age, I have found it impossible to believe in invisible things that I cannot see or I cannot prove. But today, there are still plenty of people that do believe in gods, that are religious, deeply religious. I know lots of people. But there are also lots of gods, aren't there? And I don't know the answer to this, how many gods there are being worshipped in the world that we live in today, but it must be hundreds. And if you look at those people, they are all, to a man and to a woman, convinced that the God that they have chosen to worship is the right one. And I think that's possibly what we're looking at during the period of Roman Britain, or the period of the Roman Empire. They turned up in the wild north of what we now call England, and they found natives worshipping a sort of a warrior type god who hunted people, who hunted animals, and liked being in the wild, untamed woodlands. And in that, they interpreted that as their Mars, their red god, their god of war, and their Silvanus, their god of the woodlands. I think part of it, at least, is as simple as that. I also like to think that the Romans, when they arrived in a country like Britannia, found our deities a little bit less sort of boring and staid, a bit more raunchy, a little bit more carry on. However, we do need to consider, don't we, this situation with our outlier here at Adel. Why is there this Cocidius being worshipped here? Well, I think it's fairly easy, isn't it, to sort of, you know, we've got a fort here, we've got a road network. Okay, we're 120 miles away, but that's not that far in the scheme of things when you've got a good road network. Clearly, somebody who'd been stationed up there on the wall has come here and they've brought their belief system with them. That is until some of you can find me evidence of Cocidius somewhere else. And that is what I want you to do. I want you to find Cocidius in the Midlands and in the South, in Wales. I reckon he's out there. Go find him. If I may interrupt that segment, I think I may have said something which is not strictly true, and the truth is important to me on this channel. I've probably just said words to the effect of, I've always found it impossible to believe in things that are invisible or for which there is no proof, there is no evidence, no real hard evidence. That is not strictly true, because I believe in something called the algorithm. In fact, although I can't see it, I've never seen any actual proof of its existence. I absolutely revere it. In fact, I live in fear of it. I revere it and I fear it. The algorithm. That's the end of the video, so it's now time for my birthday surprise. Yes. Hello? Hello? It's my birthday.